Everyone, welcome to another Friday Leadership Live, Elevate.Strategy. My name is Simeon Wong, and it's great to be with you here today. I am delighted today for another AMA. Hold on a second here. I just got to get out of here. All right, there we go. So another Friday, another AMA Ask Me Anything, and I'm excited today to also share a little bit about leadership tips from one of the interviews that I did earlier on this year, and that was with Mark Bowden. So we'll get to that shortly. But first, I wanted to say hi to everybody. Thank you for your support. I know many of you cannot catch the live broadcast, but afterwards, the engagement has been wonderful and very encouraging. So, I started this journey about, I think 4 or 5 months ago now. I've had something going on every week, every Friday, whether it's a guest or an AMA, and it's been great. There's a lot of videos that I haven't quite timestamped and edited yet, so I apologize for that, and that'll be coming up sooner than later. So I have a backlog, probably about 4 or 5 videos, but they're all great videos, and I'm going to time. As usual, it's really loud outside, so I'm just going to close this here. All right. So as promised, wanted to emphasize today on a couple of things. So first of all, sort of a quick update on Elevate.Strategy. Another wonderful week. We had 2 clients signed up this week who were able to not only go through the program that I offer them as far as coaching, but also be able to find really wonderful work. And one particular person called me just out of the blue last week, and I'd worked with her before, and she had a lot of experience in sort of the accounting element of field, but she wanted to go into sales. And so we went through a sort of a whole program of what it meant to reinvent and repivot yourself with the skills and capabilities of sales. And so we kind of put that on her resume. And earlier this week, she called me and said she had an interview. And the interview was an hour and a half long. She didn't expect that. But the next day she called me and said she got the job. So that's very exciting. That's the kind of work that I really enjoy. So, all right, so enough about that. If you are here live, please drop a comment below, ask questions, anything that, if you've been watching any of the interviews that I've had, anything about the guests. Today, we're going to talk about credibility and why that's important for leadership and why that's important to be a really good leader. And I've picked up this cue from an interview that I did with Mark Bowden probably about a month and a half ago now. And Mark, as you know, you may remember, he's a body language and communications expert. And I remember the first time we spoke to him, I said, how did you get into this field? And even during the interview, he expressed that even very early on, he was interested in human dynamics and how people were communicating. So he kind of got into this area that way. And slowly, as he sort of accumulated more knowledge and observation, he started to have a coaching practice in this area. So now he's being invited to guest speak at all kinds of public forums. He's been hired on to coach various people, G7 leaders, all the way to very famous people that you may or may not know, and all in the spirit of helping people to excel in sometimes nonverbal communication. So in the way that they present themselves, in the way that they express themselves. So when I had them on the interview, we talked about his career journey and how he got to where he was. We also spoke a little bit about his philosophy of what it means to communicate with nonverbal communication. And one of the things that he talked a lot about was the idea of standing out, being able to gain trust and be able to earn credibility. And that's really his motto is, who doesn't want to stand out more? Who doesn't want to gain more credibility and trust? And so as I was listening through the interview again, the theme kept coming back to credibility as being very, very important for being a good leader. And so I was going to do a couple of different interviews and kind of summarize them into several nuggets, but this itself was a big enough topic that I thought we could dedicate today, maybe 20 minutes or so talking about it. And certainly if you've had any thoughts around what credibility means, if you've tried to be a credible leader, and what has that meant to you, and why credibility is important for establishing a great team, establishing great leadership, please feel free to drop comments and reach out to me afterwards. So let me just kind of go through a little bit of his background. So he was fascinated with, Mark was very fascinated with human behavior. And so the importance of that, the dynamic between what you say and how you present it is something that is extremely important, because how you say something sort of subconsciously affects what is it that you're saying and the credibility behind that. And the authenticity and the authority all comes along with that. And his question was, wouldn't it be great to understand people better, right? And oftentimes we get into conflicts because of miscommunication, or someone said something, I didn't mean that, but it came across, as a different way, and it was received differently, and there's conflict there. But he also emphasized the fact that this is not something that you're born with. You can actually learn to communicate and listen and understand people better. So that's the premise of his work, is that through coaching and through kind of teaching people through forums, you can actually learn to communicate better and to understand. And in that, so being able to develop credibility in your conversations with people or your presentation. He wanted to eradicate the idea that only some people can be great communicators. So that's sort of his life goal and mission. Now, he talked about the fact that the brain is a prediction machine. So basically, he said that, if you present someone with sort of a minimal specifications, that the brain will take that and naturally extend it to what the next conclusion or thought might be. And that's absolutely true, right? We're often in a conversation, and it might be a topic that is contentious, but as soon as you start talking along a certain theme, there are keywords that start to get the other person's brain thinking about what you're going to say next. And so that's sort of the same way when you're communicating with someone and trying to establish credibility, is the direction that you're speaking, the words that you're using, helps their brain to start thinking ahead of, okay, what is this person going to say? Do they have integrity to back that up about the facts that they're about to say, or some instructional thing about what you should be doing? And so this kind of creates a world of imagination, of possibility, right? If you can anticipate what the other person is going to say and anticipate what they're going to say through nonverbal cues as well. Mark mentioned that a lot of times, and I agree with him, that the common strategy that we develop is the fact that, I'll just keep on being me and other people will get it, right? Other people understand me. But the strategy doesn't really work, because there's a lot of assumptions that go behind that, right? Number one is that people actually pay attention to you. That's the first thing, is if they don't really regard you as being in the room, there's no way that they're going to kind of get you and kind of get the leadership style that you have, or even kind of give you the time of day. And so that doesn't work. So we have to work actively at presenting ourselves and to being able to establish our credibility in marketing ourselves, in personal branding, in helping people figure out what it is I'm about. And Mark challenged us to think about what is it that we want people in the room to say about us when we're not there, right? So what is it that what's one word that you want people to describe you as when you're not there? There's no sort of pressure of saying something about you, but what is it? And whatever is it that they say about you is maybe something that you agree with. So it might be integrity. He used that example. If Mark walks out of the room, or if I walk out of the room, I'd like people to say he's trustworthy, right? So then the question was, how do you become trustworthy? How do you establish that and do something about that? And so he gave a number of different tips there, which was, I thought, wonderful. And his motto we talked about earlier was to stand out, to win trust, and to gain credibility. And trust is something that maybe we understand a little bit more of, because we kind of engage in trust relationships every day, whatever it is that we do. But credibility, as I was discovering, is kind of different nuance, right? It depends on whether or not you're speaking with a friend or whether you're speaking to an audience. Credibility really kind of comes before you and really presents, is this person worth listening to? Is what they're going to say likely going to be true? So the question I have for you is, is it credibility important in your leadership? And if so, in what ways have you tried to demonstrate credibility to your team or to an audience? And why it is so important is the definition of credibility really is the quality or power of inspiring belief. Okay. So again, the definition of credibility is the quality or power of instilling belief. So what's the power of instilling belief? It's essentially kind of making or enabling people to believe what it is that you're saying to be true, right? Or at least likely to be true. and therefore having an audience after what you say to be able to listen to what you tell them that they should do, or kind of guidance around what your vision is, or anything like that as a leader. And as a salesperson in business, this credibility element of being able to gain trust and empower someone to believe what you're saying in sales, that's extremely important, right? Because people aren't going to buy something they don't believe that they want, and they don't believe that you're telling the truth about. So sales is a great example of where credibility comes into play about how you establish that trust. And when you establish credibility, your clients, your customers, your peers, they respect you. They vouch for you, they're your champion, and they continue to use your business because they feel connected to what you say, what you do, and what you stand for, right? So think about applying credibility, the ability, the quality or power to instill or inspire belief. Think about that in your work environment and what that looks like, right? So that's why credibility is important. But what are the components of establishing credibility, right? So you might ask this question around, so what does it look like, credibility in everyday situations? So there's a couple of them. I think number one is having integrity, right? So integrity is the ability to be honest and have a strong moral standing. So if you're a person of integrity, people know that you're an upstanding person. You're not likely to be someone who kind of pulls wool over the eyes of other people. You're going to tell the truth. You're going to tell it as it is. And integrity is not something that's built overnight, right? It's a quality of yourself that's built over maybe perhaps months or years. And integrity includes things like showing up on meetings on time, right? Doing what it is that you say, or saying what it is that you do, and vice versa. So part of credibility is having integrity. And so as you think about being a leader, whether you're making a presentation or whether you're presenting to a client, the idea of being honest and being to have a strong moral standing is very, very important to being credible. A second element or kind of quality of credibility is competence. And so, folks want to understand that not only is what you're saying about something true, but the fact that you actually have some authority behind that perhaps you've done this before, right? And you're competent to be able to live up to what you're saying. Even if you're saying something that you haven't done before, you understand that if you were in that position, that you could do so. And so people can follow you, people can understand and say, I want to mimic something that Simeon has done, or something like that, right? Because competence is extremely important. And by definition, competence is possessing the knowledge, the skill, and the qualification that makes the speaker qualified to speak on that topic. And so competence, it doesn't always come in the form of I've done this before, but it really means that I've thought about the situation and I think this is probably the best way to go forward, right? So credibility and competence are important together. Another aspect of credibility is being relationally sensitive, right? So how many times have you been speaking to someone, they kind of gloss over their eyes and they're not listening to you anymore, probably because you're not developing a good relationship or rapport with them as you're speaking with them. So having credibility for people to listen and hear what you have to say really relies upon your ability to kind of be sensitive to that relationship as you're speaking with them. And it's being, relationally sensitive, meaning that the speaker is understanding and empathetic to the audience's interests or value, right? So empathy is related to relational sensitivity, because if you are able to put yourself in someone's shoes or be able to empathize with their problem, then they understand that this is someone who actually cares about what they're going through, and therefore what they're going to say from now on has relevance, and you gain credibility that way. And again, if you understand or if you relate to any of these elements, please feel free to drop a comment. Would love to hear from you. If you have any questions about what that might look like, or maybe some situations or scenarios where you've questioned whether or not you have these qualities or someone who's leading you has these qualities, please let me know and let the audience know. Another quality of credibility is having sound judgment. And when you're in a team race or team building exercise, inevitably someone always kind of rises to the top naturally to become the leader of the team, right? And that might be someone who's the loudest, or someone with the most the best ideas, or someone who just kind of is able to take control of the situation, have good judgment, and be able to kind of steer the team in the right direction. So having sound judgment over time helps you develop credibility, because people will trust that you know what you're doing, and they'll trust that if you make a comment, a judgment, or an assessment about something, that it's likely to be true, right? So you're credible in what you have to say. And the judgment element when you're speaking to an audience is really demonstrated by the fact that you're able to discern the subtleties of different things. So, in a complex business situation, you might be able to kind of go and establish that the root cause is something that other people have not thought about before. And a lot of great leaders have this ability to do that, is to establish the quality of leadership based on discernment, right? So here's actually what the issue is. And so what I have to say from now on actually matters. So that's another quality. So credibility is built upon integrity. It's built upon competence. It's built upon relational sensitivity. It's built upon sound judgment. And I think the last part maybe about credibility is around likability, right? So that's different than relational sensitivity, because you can be very empathetic, but in some case, maybe for whatever reason, they're not drawn to you as a person. And in some cases, it's because that you're too boring, right? You're speaking much too slowly, and people don't know what to emphasize upon when they listen to you. Or it could be that you're speaking way too fast and you're too aggressive in your approach. And so it doesn't matter at that point what you have to say, or whether or not you're relationally sensitive to the crowd or to the audience. That likability factor is not there. And so obviously you tune out, right? And that goes the same with any relationship, right? Do people like you? When you're in an interview, right? Credibility is extremely important. And this idea of likability is, at the end of the day, sometimes people will expect you to be able to do those skills, right? When they say on a job description, you have to have A, B, C, D, E, by the time they have you in the interview room, they've expected that you've done A, B, C, D, E. So now it comes down to, can I actually work with this person? The credibility element of things is, if I like working with this person, I'm more likely to have synergy with them. I'm more likely to have some sort of creative aspiration with them that kind of, can get over very difficult challenges, right? So likability is the ability for a speaker to enter a room and have an easygoing personality that makes them easy to warm up to and trust. And that takes practice, Some people are likable because they ask the right questions. On a one-on-one setting, they might challenge the audience when they're in a large crowd to be able to kind of think about, what it is that they need to focus on. But the warmth that you bring out in that's what really draws people to kind of listen and respond properly to that. So credibility is, built upon all of these features and qualities that I think Mark Bowden, presents very correctly, is that you can practice these things, but you need to understand that each element has its own distinct attributes to it. And you really have to kind of focus on, what is it about likability, sound judgment, relational sensitivity that you're trying to get better at. One of the ways that I try to coach my coachees to get better at this is by scripting, right? So when you script something, it might be, the typical 3 or 4 interview questions, or it might be, what is it that this audience wants to hear when you come present today? Or what direction does this team need? Is to script out, what is it that you're going to say to them? And literally in bullet point forms, you might say, this bullet point is going to be addressing judgment, right? This bullet point is going to be addressing relational sensitivity, that I sympathize with the team. I've been there before, and here's why I know what to do, right? That's also sound judgment. Another bullet point might be, ascribing to the likability, right? You're going to say something that means something to them, that enables them to realize that, hey, don't take the situation too seriously. because, at the end of the day, it's something that we'll get over, right? So you can script it out, you can practice it, and in a situation where you're trying to really aspire to inspire a lot more people, it's really then practicing, right, in front of a mirror, to understand that to gain or earn credibility, you have to earn your own self-respect. You've got to be able to convince yourself in front of a mirror that what you're saying is relevant, has sound judgment, all these things, right? So credibility at the end of the day is also around just finding ways to show consistency around being faithful to what you said, right? To being honest, to being transparent. And all these things you can kind of practice, because these qualities many times are inside of you. They are, with the right person, let's just say, it's easier to be transparent. It's easier to show sound judgment. With the wrong people that are harder to kind of get through to, you could still tap into those abilities, but you have to practice, and you have to understand what impact are you having, or do you want to leave behind with folks. So my question to you is, what would you like people you're working with to say about you when you leave the room, right? So we talked about that earlier. If you want people to say that, well, he's very likable, and therefore he or she is a good leader, and that's what you want to be known for. Well, then Mark Bowden reminded us that at every point or juncture in time that you have an opportunity is to state that, overstate that, and say, I'm trying to show integrity here, guys. And the way that our team has to be had to show integrity to our client is to live up to what we said we were going to do, let's say in the statement of work, right? And where there's an easy way out to say to the team, this is not the best thing for the client. So you're looking for opportunities to reinforce what it is that you want people to address you for, and to establish credibility. So, and there are many other aspects about Mark Bowden's comments and leadership elements that I really loved. He talked about the fact that there's a lot of psychology behind understanding nonverbal cues. So credibility is not just in what you say, but how you behave, how you act, and even sort of establishing trust around what he's really good at, which is body language expert, right? Is how you present yourself in a way that if you're open, it seems to mean that you are more higher integrity and trustworthiness. Whereas if you're closed, and I get this from Mark just recently did a video in Canada, in Toronto, where I am right now. We're having our elections coming up, and he did a really short video on assessing each one of the leaders and how they were performing based on their body language. And one of the leaders of the parties was addressing people like this, right? Kept going down the straight line, told it as it is, had confidence. But he said that leader was trying to show credibility by gaining trust, almost like a prayer kind of a gesture, right? And to really kind of establish that connection with people based on that line. Whereas people who are some of the other leaders who are showing asymmetry, he talked about the fact that, asymmetrical speakers tend to kind of lack credibility because they seem to be waffling on issues and not really knowing what they're talking about. So he broke down a lot of the key 5 leaders in Canada who are running for our presidency or prime ministry in our prime minister role. Is that right? In our country, and it was fascinating. So how each person tries to establish credibility will change from time to time, but at the same time, you kind of resort back to kind of your habits, right? Your basic fundamental ways to kind of establish that. So that's why practice is so important, to really establish your personal brand about how you gain credibility in different situations is so important. The last thing I would say before we close off today is, how do we establish credibility in the eyes of an interviewer, right? So I've had a lot of clients recently who are going through interviews, many of whom who were headhunted, many of whom who have had coffee chats, that initial connection with someone who might be interested in them, but are now at the phase of interviewing, and they have to present themselves and everything they wrote in their resume to be able to kind of convince the interviewer that they really are the candidate for the job. So establishing credibility in that context has to integrate everything that we just talked about, right? You have to show sound judgment, right? If you're going to be a leader, you've got to show that you have the ability to discern the nuances of different business situations and be able to address them. you have to show that you're able to kind of have the integrity behind how you're going to do the right thing every time. The likability aspect of it is, even the personality element of how you respond to questions is going to show them likely what you're going to look like or interact with your team. And so all these elements come together as you're preparing for an interview. All the more reason for you to script it out and to really address the point that each one of these building blocks, that's what I'm trying to do, is to hit each one of them, and in doing so to gain the credibility that I need to get the role. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to keep the AMA today nice and short. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to connect with you. Thank you for the feedback. Really appreciate all the support that I've had. I hope to continue with these interviews, and I've got people that are booked up, leaders that are booked up until probably the end of October, if not November. One of the leaders that I've been trying to get on is the general manager of eBay Canada, and he's going to be coming on pretty soon. So stay tuned. Every Friday around 12 or 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when I broadcast. All right. So until next week, have a good weekend, and we'll see you soon.